let me know. Give me a countdown. No, I'm just kidding. Let me know when we're good to go. I guess we're ready to start, and it's good, so good that you've came tonight, and appreciate it so very much. I'm Pastor Riley Richardson. I'm the pastor here at Myrtle Grove Methodist Church, and so glad that you've come. So glad we're able to host this event, and I see that Commissioner Underhill has made it. Again, thank you for coming. If you need the restroom, to your left, back behind you, through this, on the other side of this wall, there's a restroom there. And then out both exit signs will lead you, and you can follow the signs to restrooms as well. So we're, again, so glad that you've come, and I look forward to hearing Commissioner Underhill as he leads us through some confusing things, but you're going to make it all clear. So glad that you're here tonight, and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Pastor Riley. Actually, if you don't mind, it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all if you'd start us off with just a quick prayer, asking for the Lord to just bless everything.
I will. Thank you so much. Let's pray. Father, we're so grateful and thankful that you woke us up this morning, breathed into us the breath of life, and gave us grace to make it through the day. We thank you, Lord, for your call upon our life as citizens to serve in this community. And we thank you, Lord, for those who have put this meeting together, and for Commissioner Underhill and for the work that he's done in this district. We pray your blessing upon this meeting, and we pray for wisdom and for understanding in all that, Lord, we do. We hope and pray that we'll honor you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much for asking.
Thank you, sir. Well, considering the fact that this church has given us this space for all things that we have to do governmentally, it's Pastor, I definitely very much appreciate that. So thank you guys for coming out. I apologize for being a little bit late. Got a little slow coming off of base tonight. My intent of the town hall is that, because obviously I think everybody who's already tracking this recognizes that the Board of County Commissioners has come up with a plan that they intend to implement for the redistricting. It is a struggle for me because even in our own meetings, we always have the public who wants to speak on an issue speak first. And then the Board of County Commissioners talks. In this case, for reasons I cannot begin to understand, we didn't have the town halls up front. The town halls should have come up front, and what we should have done is first ask the citizens, what are the equities that matter to you? What are the things that matter to you with regard to the redistricting? Okay? This is a very significant redistricting moment for us here in Escambia County, because it's our first opportunity to redistrict in which we are not bound by the 1984 decision of McMillan versus Escambia County. Now, 1984 was a very different time, right? In 1984, the court decided that, hey, we need to have a majority-minority district. There needs to be a district that is heavily black so that African Americans can have proper representation, okay? 1984 was a really long time ago. Okay. The McMillan ruling does not dictate our behavior here now. And maybe that might have been the right thing back then. Okay? But in today's time, 2021, and there are many households, when they sign on the census, they're mixed households. So even at the household level, we have integrated as a society with regard to the color of our skin. In 1984, we were a long way away. People couldn't imagine how long we'd be away from having a black president, and yet we've had a black president. We've got black four-star generals. We've got female four-star generals. Life has changed so much since 1984 when that ruling was made. But what we know today is if you think that you can fight racism by applying racism, then it probably isn't working out it's not going to work out very well for you. So that issue, that McMillan ruling, the county commission applied that as their number one rule in their decision making. The first and foremost that we were going to protect the majority-minority district in District 3, when in fact there is no law that says that we have to do that. And in fact, we know in 2021 that dividing ourselves up by the color of our skin is a really bad business practice, no matter how good the intent might be. Okay, so that was the first rule that they had. The second rule that seemed to be very prominent in our discussions was preserving the incumbents and not redistricting in such a way that the incumbent sitting in any seat, whether it be ECUA, the school board, or BOCC, would be redistricted out of their seat. That was like a primary rule for how we made these decisions that are going to affect your lives for the next 10 years. Now, I asked the attorney, why is that a rule? Is that a rule that we're bound to by somebody? No, that's not a rule. That's the best business practice of Florida Association of Counties, was the answer. Well, the Florida Association of Counties, for those that don't know, is made up of the commissioners from the 67 counties of Florida. In other words, they're all incumbents. So don't be too surprised that the incumbents all think that it's a really good idea to make sure that you don't redistrict an incumbent out of his seat. Okay? But what I found and what I believe to be true is, had we had these town halls up front and had we asked citizens if this was important to you, you'd have probably said no. And the reason for that is because I think that the voters are very cognizant of something that somehow those of us that are sitting in the chairs forget. And that is that we are temporary stewards of an office that belongs to you. It's not my seat. It's not my discretionary money. It's not my, Jonathan isn't my employee, and it's not my phone number, 595-4920. That's yours, and I'm just temporarily using it during my tenure as your county commissioner. That's what I hear from citizens everywhere I go. And it's funny because black, white, Hispanic, male, female, heterosexual, homosexual, rich, poor, this is something that people really agree on. I hear that same comment, that the incumbent is a temporary steward of a job regardless of what somebody's political affiliation is. The only people that don't agree with that, it seems, are the incumbents that are sitting comfortably in these chairs. Now here's the problem. Incumbency is a very powerful force. Okay? Incumbency is too powerful a force in our government as it is. If you've already got the seat, you've got huge name recognition, you've got all the donors, lining up to give you money, people have already voted for you once. It's really hard to knock an incumbent out. An incumbent should not be comfortable in his seat, he should be uncomfortable in his seat. Okay? The redistricting, to do our redistricting, to make decisions that are going to affect your lives for a decade, with putting weight on the incumbent, what's good for people who are currently sitting in a seat instead of focusing on you, is a very bad business practice. And it's a bad business practice that led to some of what the county proposal is. It has, much hay has been made about my not attending the first meeting on this. Quite frankly, when this first came up, and Commissioner Burgash mentioned moving Perdido Key into District 1, everybody laughed at it because it was kind of a laughable joke. I'm a father first. I'll never ask forgiveness for that. I'm a father first. And when my kid is performing at the world finals of his sport in Lake Havasu, I'm going to that every time. As long as this body will allow me to, I will be there to support my kids. The other commissioners knew that. The other commissioners also knew that the idea of taking and Perdido Key out and moving it up to District 1 was going to be very unpopular. Okay? But the decision was made that that's the route we're going to go. So the question is, though, and the reason I had the first town hall here in Myrtle Grove is because I really wanted to get an idea, to talk to you guys about what I feel like the impact is going to be on the traditional west side. And also to get your thoughts and ideas, and really just to hear. I got the county webcasting this so that we can so that your comments can be heard. Whether those comments are abided to or tended to by anybody other than me, I can't really promise that. But you darn sure have a right to say the thing, to have a voice in the discussion. So the impact of moving Perdido Key out of District 2, and then also, what that has a net impact of doing, of actually making District 2 a little bit more city-centric. Okay, we sat in this room and actually filled it up, 400 people in this room, when there was a very heavily financed downtown interest wanting to build affordable housing on your old YMCA location. Okay, and we as a community stood against that. We talked about all the ramifications of that, and as your commissioner, I stood with you and said, no, that's not what's right for Myrtle Grove. And to this day, now after 2 attempts at it, while we don't have a YMCA back, which is the right thing for Myrtle Grove, the best thing, we certainly have not, we've managed to fend off a couple of attempts that would have been bad for Myrtle Grove. One of the reasons that we can do that is because the West Side Commissioner does not really have a whole lot of an electorate downtown, okay? And you've heard me say for 7 years now that I'm not a downtown commissioner. Downtown's got plenty of representation. They've got plenty of political influence. Okay? Just most recently, downtown has decided that, oh yeah, they probably ought to go ahead and fix this homeless problem they have under 110. And what was their proposal? Let's build some homeless camps out in the county. Places like, I don't know, Mayfair, Myrtle Grove. This is the kind of neighborhood where they send the stuff they don't want. That's kind of been a downtown trend. Okay? I don't make a whole lot of friends saying that stuff out loud, because as a commissioner, you're not supposed to say that stuff out loud. Okay? Never going to stop. Going to continue to do it. Okay? The traditional west side of Navy Point, Warrington, Myrtle Grove, Twin Oaks, if you grew up out here, you went to the beach out in Perdido. Perdido is your beach. Okay? Prior to my coming on, and actually never been a secret as to why I ran for office, it's because the very downtown heavily financed folks wanted to pave Paradise and put up a parking lot. That was the thing that finally made Wendy say, go ahead and do it. Okay? Perdido Key was not ever meant to be a tourist destination. That's supposed to be our public beach. It's supposed to be our home, right? And if you grew up here on the west side, that's how it was. Those development interests have been very adamant about trying to, turn it into something, that is much more profitable for them, but at the expense of our quality of life. So having more precincts for the District 2 Commissioner that are inside the city limits, having more of the electorate that puts the District 2 Commissioner in this chair, being downtown and city interests, is going to be bad for the Brownsvilles and the Mayfairs and the Warringtons, and for Myrtle Grove. Okay. Now, there's a common trope that I've heard in politics quite often, that all the D2 money goes to Perdido Key and that's all it cares about. That's all the District 2 cares about. And I hear that, and yet the tale of the tape makes it clear that that's just not the case. In fact, the people in Perdido Key, when they tell me what they want, they say, focus on cleaning up the rest of the community. Focus on the stormwater issues, focus on the trash. People in Perdido actually want to have less focus on Perdido. Okay, so be very careful about that trope, right? It's a lie, it's always been a lie. The people that moved to Perdido Key who didn't grow up around here, those people recognize, that they moved to Perdido Key instead of Destin because they didn't want to Destin, right? They didn't want to live that lifestyle. They wanted to live a family lifestyle. They wanted to live the lifestyle that we've got here on the west side. Okay, so be very careful. I'm sure throughout the discussion there will be some of that garbage. But if you ever certainly thought that Myrtle Grove took a back seat to Perdido Key, the news for you, taking a back seat to downtown interests, that's going to make the old days look like good old days. Okay. But the tale of the tape again tells a very different story. More street lights have gone up within a couple of miles of the front gate of Corey Station than just about anywhere else in Escambia County. More stormwater, more street lights, all those kind of things. Chris, tell me if I'm wrong. But, I mean, you know, and we would be even more successful with our stormwater issues here in Escambia, and particularly in Old West Side, if we hadn't been up against so much political pressure. Lake Charlene should have gotten its project done 2 or 3 years ago. And the 80-something houses that flooded in the last storm wouldn't have flooded, didn't have to flood. Okay? That's the politics. Okay? And the more that your commissioner is influenced by downtown money and downtown interests, the more you're going to have the VTMAEs, and you're going to have the OLF8s, and you're going to have empty tech parks, and the more that you will continue to not have the stormwater issues, the traffic issues. And just as we've seen very, very recently, that when they run into a problem, like their homeless problem that they've got down there under 110, when they finally decide to solve it, their solution is to kick it out to the west side. Okay? No matter what you do, you got to make sure that west side representation represents everything from Bayou Chico west, and you've got a voice in opposition to the things that downtown feels are good ideas. Okay? Because they're just not good ideas for us here on the west side much of the time. So we started with the McMillan case, which we shouldn't have. We focused on incumbents, which we shouldn't have. And then we got into this kind of very political thing with regard to Perdido Key. Okay? Perdido Key is a very, fairly politically powerful equity holder. Beulah is a fairly powerful equity holder. Okay? And those balance one another out. Okay? Your interests here in the southwest sector are about good stewardship and about repairing the stuff, the old stuff, okay? But we're not wanting to tear everything down and start over, right? Your interests up in Beulah, all new stuff, right? You see how those two things, you're gonna find that if you've got a county commissioner who's bent between those two things, he's probably gonna end up doing neither of them well, okay? Our role here on the west side, stewardship. That's the key word, and it's been the key word for 7 years, and it's been pretty effective. So those were the paths that we took. And those paths gave us the commission proposed districts. Now, unfortunately, I hate, this one's called the Burgash Plan, that one's called the Underhill Plan. Again, for some reason, it's not about us. So get it through our heads, right? It's not an Underhill Plan and a Burgash Plan. They're two different approaches. This approach is what you arrive at when you start by saying all of our black folks need to be in one place. This is what you arrive at when you say we need to make sure that we don't move any incumbents out of the districts that they're in. You see this little dip down right here? It's kind of an anomaly. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that's an anomaly. You know why that's there? Because that's where an incumbent was 10 years ago. Okay? When you think through those processes, you end up here. I think those are all the wrong processes. Process should have started with you guys, not ended with you guys. Should have started with a town hall. Should have started with quite a few town halls, listening to your equities. And then what we should have focused on is, first of all, saying incumbents, it's been a great ride. And if you are a truly good incumbent, right, if you've earned the right to continue to represent the people, you've got super high name recognition, you're going to do just fine in the next election. And you'll have a track record to run on, right? If you did a good job. If you didn't do a good job, well, that problem solves itself too, right? So you throw out the incumbent issue, and then you focus on trying to keep our neighborhoods together, okay? Now, we've got a rule, a requirement, that the districts be more or less the same size, okay? And unfortunately, so that meant that you have to kind of move your precincts around in such a way that keeps your numbers together. Well, one of the travesties of 10 years ago was splitting Myrtle Grove up, okay? On the map that we've got here, utilizing, focusing on putting the neighborhoods together, I wasn't able to figure out a way to run the numbers in a way that got Precinct 99 back into Myrtle Grove, back into the same district as the rest of Myrtle Grove. Okay, it needs to be. It should be. And in all honesty, if we weren't fighting so hard against the bad business practices that gave us this, and if in fact we were just focused on primary, number one rule, keep the neighborhoods together. Because the neighborhood's equities, regardless of whether you're black or white or Republican or Democrat, gay or straight or whatever else, neighborhood equities at the local level, that's where neighbors unify, right? When we went and put the 700-something streetlights up that we ended up with in Myrtle Grove, okay, I have no idea what the religion, the sexual orientation, or the skin color, or the party affiliation of any of the people who worked so hard to get that done. And I didn't care. What we did all care about was streetlights, and we got streetlights because we worked together as Myrtle Grove. Right? And for those of you who participated in that, you remember how that worked. Here's the map. Where do you guys think the lighting needs to be? And I shut up and listened. Now, if we said there needs to be a light here, but there wasn't a pole there, and we couldn't get a power there, we didn't get a light exactly everywhere somebody wanted, but it started with what? It started with you guys. It started with your opinions about your neighborhoods. All of our local politics needs to begin and end with your opinion about your neighborhood. Look at the poor folks up in Beulah. Not hardly anybody up in Beulah wanting OLF 8, but they got it rammed down their throat because the political interest, the political demand signal said, we're going to have an industrial park up there. Now, the people had to fight hard to try to get it modified from an industrial park and turned into something else, but at the end of the day, that wasn't Beulah's initiative, and yet it was rammed down their throat, okay? Perdido Key, see we got Mr. Krupnick here, Perdido Key Association, appreciate you coming out. Perdido Key had absolutely no interest in having a bingo parlor, having gambling there. Wasn't in our interest. But boy, the government was sure pushing to give us one. If you queried anybody out on the island, it was always one of those that was like a 5-to-1, 7-to-1, 10-to-1 against. If you focus on the people in the neighborhood first and last, then you give the people in the neighborhoods what they want, things work out just fine. And you don't go spending money on things you don't need. So when I had Connor, our intern, I basically set him down and said, look, here's the equities, right? But my equity number one is keep the neighborhoods together to the best of your ability. Time ran out on us a little bit with regard to Precinct 99, but there's absolutely no reason that we couldn't continue to work on that and get 99 back into Myrtle Grove. Okay, no reason at all for that. So what you see here is two different outcomes, two different models. This one has almost no dissent from anywhere in the population. Okay? This one, enormous amounts of dissent. This one has dissent coming from traditional West Side because they recognize that the more focus, that the more you expand that focus away from what is the traditional West Side, the weaker that your District 2 Commissioner is going to become with regard to the issues that matter here in Myrtle Grove. It's extremely unpopular with Perdido Key, and it's extremely unpopular with Beulah. And I won't kid you, it affects them a lot more than it does you. But it was also important to me because, quite frankly, Myrtle Grove is the core of the West Side. It was important to me to start the town halls here. So that's why I had this one here tonight, and I appreciate you guys coming out for it. So what I would like to do for anybody who has a voice that they would like to be heard with regard to to the redistricting. Doesn't matter if you agree with one or both of these or neither of these, doesn't matter one bit. I would just ask that everybody be respectful of one another's time and just stay on topic because everybody came out tonight to talk about one thing, and that's the redistricting. So with that, oh, we got another microphone?
Check.
Yep, that's working. Okay, so everybody knows, I think everybody knows Jonathan. If anybody has anything that they would like to say, by all means, now is a good opportunity to get your voice heard. And again, it may not make a difference, but it makes a difference to me. So, anybody?
Excuse me, other than District 1,
see me 3 times this week. I'm most interested in hearing what citizens have to say. I'm an involved citizen. I've had several discussions with my commissioner, and I'm troubled by the commission proposed districts because of my commissioner. He's a nice guy, but we won't go down that path too far. And he's probably watching this thing if he's got an ounce of brains, and he certainly does. This is Rex Jensen speaking. Can these be, to me, this should be on the ballot. We should have a say in what happens here. Not you guys, because we're not getting good stewardship from the commissioners in general for a long time here, for a long time. And I'm from someplace else in the world originally. I'm one of those that moved down here because of air conditioning. I actually grew up in California. It's not the one that I grew up in out there now, just for the record. But this is the Brownsville questions. I watched the special meeting the other day that you guys had downtown, and the discussion about the Brownsville area and things. One of the problems we have, let me just look around the room here. Well, I don't see anybody that's of color of the current vernacular. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, as soon as you do anything that looks like you're going to take that away, whether the people in Brownsville themselves care or not, there'll be headlines all over the place calling you all kinds of names for watering down the historically black district. And just for the record, my roommate in the Air Force for 3 years was a black guy, wonderful man. And I just watched him get married for the 2nd time. His first wife died. But I'd like to see this on the ballot. Take it out of your hands and let us decide. And then if we've made the mess based on that proposal or this proposal, then we have to live with it instead of running around being irritated with. And I like it the leadership that you're taking on this, Doug, because you're not going to be here. You're not running the next time, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So to me, you have no axe to. Well, you may have an axe to grind, but I think you get my point. So I've spoken enough. I just like to see it change.
No, I appreciate the comments, and I'll say that you're right in that not having an axe to grind. In that, for me, this was always going to be a very temporary job. I'm a very, very strong believer in the way that the founders built this nation. That we are supposed to be an all-volunteer government. Okay, there shouldn't be want to stay on topic, but at the same time, if you really want to fix this career politician garbage, push to make sure that there's no benefits that exceed the time in service. The fact that we've got politicians getting retirement checks for being a politician is probably making the founders roll over in their grave. So the first and best tool that you have to help you get there is something called Recall Florida. Check it out on Facebook, go wherever you get your news, but Recall Florida is trying to get to a point where commissioners can be recalled. So that if we start to act up, if we poorly represent, as you just said, in between elections, there's a mechanism to get rid of a guy. Let's face it, what our elections have basically come down to is you kind of end up picking the hoping for the better of two evils. Because the best people in our community don't run for office. The best people in our community, this is coming from a guy who ran for office, okay? And I think it's an absolute travesty of our society because I think there are literally tens of thousands of Escambians who would be a better commissioner than me. In fact, we tried to get them to run against the guy that was before me, and they said, I'd love to, Doug, but I'm never going to put my family through that. So, yeah, your comments are good, well stated, well placed, and I appreciate you not going down that road of personalities, because again, my name will be forgotten minutes after I turn over this seat. Okay, every commissioner will, okay, or should at least, because it really shouldn't be about the personalities. Anybody else?
So why? This
Yep, you're on.
Hi, I'm Chris Gerb. I worked with the county for 25 years. I now work for advocacy group, Flood Defenders. Flooding doesn't drainage and flooding doesn't follow district lines. The water don't care where it goes. There's a lot of flooding in the county. I don't want to get off subject. Steve Strawberger, he's out on Inner Isle. He's running for District 2. So if this district is approved that way, is he not allowed to run?
That's correct. He would not be eligible to run. Well, he would be eligible to run, but he would have to, the way our law works is you have to live in the district on the day that you're seated in your seat. So he would have to move off of his house on Inner or rent a house in the new District 2 if he wanted to be the District 2 commissioner.
Okay. Why is the law that way? I mean, why can't I live out on Pensacola Beach and be a commissioner out in District 1?
Well, it's an interesting, I mean, Santa Rosa County has that model, right, where you know, your commissioners are elected countywide, but elected to represent a particular area. In some ways, that model might be better. The downside of that model is that in order to get elected countywide, you have to at least promise that you're going to meet all those other equities, right? The benefit that we have of our system, whereby your commissioner is only elected by Westsiders, is that you end up getting a commissioner who goes downtown with his focus on the west side. I believe that the system that we have is better if we were a more noble people, you know, and recognized that you know, all the ships in this harbor are going to rise and fall in the same tide. If we could count on you know, downtown equities to actually care about places like Beach Haven and Myrtle Grove, you know, then maybe I'd be supportive of that other model. And there's a lot of folks are kind of pushing, not a lot of folks, some people are pushing to change the model of the county. But here's the thing that you got to know about it. It doesn't matter what the system is. If we don't send the right people into these seats, the system will not, there's no system strong enough to overcome the bad intent stuff. So.
Well, I would definitely love to vote for all 5 commissioners,
Yep,
especially when I work for the county.
So, yeah, I mean, I can see, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of merit to that discussion. It seems to be working. I don't know how Santa Rosa County voters feel about it, if it works for them. You know, but, you know, this is probably as good an example of anything as to why we need to very seriously look at the way we do things in Escambia County. Because I can tell you what's going to happen at the next 2 meetings. The discussion is going to be almost entirely about incorporating Beulah and Perdido Key. And that's not good for anybody, to be honest with you. But as a Perdido Key resident, I can understand it. And if I was a Beulah resident and I was watching all of that tax money that was coming out of Beulah and going elsewhere and me not having a voice on it, yeah, I'd probably be supportive of it. I'm going to be supportive of Perdido Key incorporating. You know, I don't like it. I don't want to, but I just see the direction things go, and the things that I've learned over the last 7 years tells me that, you know, that's probably the only way to protect those equities.
You mentioned Santa Rosa County. I was over there at their last board meeting, and they just voted to keep the district lines the way they were. They're about 10, 15 years behind as far as their codes and flood protection standards.
Yeah.
And their website, and I could go on with the list.
The reality is that the only portion of the current district's part that's really gotten any voice over the last 10 years in terms of people being, you know, feeling like they really weren't in the right district was this Precinct 95. Okay, this is your Perdido Bay Country Club. Very much Perdido Key type of interests. You know, they shop here, they go to church here, their kids go to school right here, right? That's all, you know, that's all, they're Perdido folks. You know, if you ask them, hey, where do you live? Out by Perdido. Okay, so in the definition of Greater Perdido, if you ask, hey, where do you live? And you say, out by Perdido, that's what Greater Perdido is. So this is the only real precinct that we really needed to address. If all we were trying to do was make sure that we were reflecting the will of the people, we had some work to do down here, a little bit of work to do down here. And in my opinion, these downtown precincts that are part of District 2 should go away. Okay? Under this plan, they do go away, And you'll notice what happens to the city. Now, the city is a bit more liberal, a bit more left than the rest of the county, and that's just a mathematical fact. Okay? The politics of the city, much more, few degrees to the left from where we're at. This plan, your city is divided between a predominantly Democratic area and a predominantly Republican area, and they split up the whole city equities. But here's the important part. The other 3 commissioners are rural commissioners. The other 3 commissioners focused on rural issues, the issues for the rest of the county. The city of Pensacola is doing just fine with being represented.
Do I have a follow-on to this
So,
comments?
yeah, actually, absolutely. Hang on.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yes.
Yep.
Check.
Can you give us the timeline of what's the board's going to do on this? What are the next steps?
So far, there's been actually a substantial amount of pushback on the county plan, primarily from the Beulah and the from Beulah and Perdido. If that pushback continues, and if that pushback were to expand across the county, then I think it's reasonable to expect that there would be that the county would push back or would pull back from this plan. Okay. Honestly, that's the best thing that could be done. Best thing to do would be to pull back and go have the town halls. Start the discussion the right way. If that doesn't happen, this comes before the board on December 2nd, and if there's not a significant amount of enough pushback from the citizens to make those commissioners rethink, then they will enact this, and it will go into effect probably the next day. So December 2nd timeframe, unless the people step up and tell the commission not to do this.
And based on the discussions that have taken place during the county's public meetings, what's your focus on the areas that we need to work on? Which districts are more likely to lean towards what you're proposing?
Well, certainly I think that Perdido and Beulah, and the greater Perdido and greater Beulah areas are leaning very hard toward this other proposal. They have very serious heartache with those equities being jammed into one and being represented by a single commissioner. I also believe that here in on the west side, there needs to be some people recognize that this is going to leave you somewhat poorly represented. And that it's very easy to get to 3 on anything that the county wants to do without thinking about the west side. It's already too easy. It's already been too easy for a long time. Those are the kind of primary ones that I'm focused on because those are in my district. Those are the people I represent. In all honesty, I believe that anybody who believes it's wrong to separate people by skin color should be standing up and saying, this is morally flawed. This is morally flawed because it begins with that concept of separating us by skin color. I would hope that we as Americans would stand against that. One of the other struggles that you have, and really kind of the end result of McMillan is, it sort of guarantees you'll always have one black commissioner. It also, by putting all the black folks in one district, kind of guarantees you'll never have 2. So always be careful when you start playing those games about unintended consequences. So I personally would like to see us, and I believe that we're a better society than that, and to go back and remove that idea from our discussion. Whether we have the political power to do that as the people over the way that things have always been done in politics, that's another matter entirely, and I don't know the answer to that question.
Are there any citizen-motivated groups within the districts that are organizing in order to object to the commission proposed districts?
Whether or not there's any organized objection to it, I really don't know. Jonathan, are you tracking anything along those lines?
I haven't had a group say, I represent X group, and we are going to do this, so I haven't had any communication from any organization like that.
No, this is as grassrootsy as it gets. You know, that the people should, if the people are going to speak up, it's going to be, you know, as individual people.
So as a resident of Innerarity Island, it might be beneficial for us to work through our homeowners association because those are bigger numbers than individuals?
Yes, and yes, right? Yes, work through your homeowners associations, work through your churches, work through whatever other organization to make sure that the word gets out. Because that's the thing, the whole system of representative democracy only works with an informed electorate. Right? The average, I mean, you've seen very little about this in the press. You're not going to see a lot about this in the press. And I can assure you that the Pensacola News Journal is not going to give us any kind of good discussion about the idea of eliminating the racially designed district. Okay, that is simply a bridge way too far for our local press. So yes, you work with your homeowners association, your churches, any other groups that you're a part of to make sure that the citizens have the what the end result is actually, and I've said this many times in my 7 years, I'm a lot less concerned about the end result than I am about making sure that we stay pure to process. Okay? And pure to process in this case is making sure you as citizens are informed.
Okay. One last question. Because the redistricting is somewhat based on the McMillan requirements being lifted, one of the requirements for McMillan was we went from at-large districts to these districts and individual elected commissioners. Was there discussion when McMillan was lifted and redrawing the district lines to going back to at-large?
No, there was no discussion of that at all, and that should have been, that's an important part of the discussion. As I've said, I'm not even really sure I like that idea, right? There's a lot of things to be worried about on that, right? Because it takes roughly about 65, 70 grand to run an effective primary election in District 2 right now, okay? 65, 70. To run a state or a county-wide race, you're looking at about 250,000, okay? So the barrier to entry, right, things that prevent common people from stepping up and doing the job, that gets worse with the county-wide election. But at the same time, as you kind of alluded to, was there a conversation? You didn't ask what was the outcome of the conversation. The question is, was there a conversation? And the answer is no. We, as your elected officials, denied you the opportunity to have that conversation. So, truly unfortunate. Mel, go ahead.
Thanks, Doug. And I want to start respectfully and congenially with saying where the two of us are lockstep. I really think it's very unfortunate that Commissioner May did not drop down to the water. I was a big proponent of that, and I found it very disconcerting that a lot of the discussion hinged on the two ECUA candidates and keeping them in a place where they could continue to run in the same district. And as I said publicly down at the BOCC meeting, that this is something that I agree with Commissioner Underhill about. When I first heard that you were planning on trying to get rid of downtown, I was adamantly against it. And when I first heard that Commissioner Bergosh and a few other people were also thinking that the Perdido Key should go back to its original lines before it got gerrymandered by WD, I was really against that. And the reason was because I thought those are wealthy districts, and that's going to leave some pretty struggling areas that used to be neighborhoods that weren't struggling, and they need a lot of lift and help. And I speak as somebody who lives on the west side, the real west side, Navy Point. And that's why I'm here tonight, and being respectful to the gentleman that is here for Beulah interests, and I understand that. Well, for redistricting, I mean, you're here from Beulah. Oh, okay, sorry, District 1. I should have said District 1. And so I just wanted to say I didn't mean to slight your comments by saying that, yeah, I'm here for the west side. And Commissioner Underhill, the reason that I came around is I got to thinking about the $1 million of, for instance, discretionary for capital expenditures every year. And then Mr. Fetzko brought his map, which I thought was fantastic. I couldn't speak to it at all because I felt like it would be unethical of me as a candidate because his map would have undistricted, redistricted, all 3 GOP candidates. So I had to keep a stopper in that, and I didn't say a lot about it, but Paul's map really reflected what the real West Side was, I thought. All I said at that time was I thanked him for being somebody who understood the core value of the core neighborhoods on the West Side. And I started to realize that if we drew the lines tighter around District 2, not just the 1 million, which over the lifetime of a tenure of a commissioner, that's $4 million in capital expenditures, along with LOST, restore monies, all the different pots of the BP, all of that money, it's a forced spend here on the West Side. And we need it. We got a lot of infrastructure needs. Just a couple of things that I wanted to respond to, just brush over quickly so that people aren't worried about it. There aren't any homeless camps slotted to go into Mayfair or Myrtle Grove. However one feels about the current homeless camp at Satoshi, the 3 locations that the city is eyeballing, 2 of them are in Commissioner May's district and 1 is up in Houston in Commissioner Brash's. So there are no plans on putting more homeless camps here. To respond to the McMillan minority majority, the commissioners voiced many times that they were extremely uncomfortable continuing to have to follow this. And as the county attorney explained, even though that court decision is no longer binding, it evolved, right or wrong, whether you agree with the original decision or not, to the fact right now that if they started getting too much away and started diluting too much of the black vote, that we could catch lawsuits under state and federal law for diluting minority votes. And that's a very real thing. And so I think it's unfortunate because Commissioner May, it's being painted as if this is something that the commission used or that they liked to do. Commissioner May had a very tight rope to walk because on one hand, he could not dilute with the help of his board. On the other hand, he couldn't saturate. So I guess a couple of questions now that I do have. And the other thing is, of course, the commission did not know you were going to be gone for that meeting, right? Everybody was really surprised when you didn't show up. No one knew you weren't coming. And so what I don't understand is, one, you took 2 late cracks in a map. This is not the first map you brought. This is the second map you brought. It busts Myrtle Grove up even more. On that map, the district that you said you couldn't, the precinct you said you couldn't figure out is more maintained than it is here. You know, that's one. 2 is, if town halls were so important to you, why didn't you have some? You didn't need, just like you don't need right now, the blessing of your board to hold town halls. I would have loved to have come to town halls on redistricting because it's a really, really hard learning curve to understand even how this works. And every time I think that I get it, even after all of the hours I've put into it, I find out I didn't know something. So why no town halls? And finally, what would you do about the fact that even Mr. Stafford said this map doesn't work? It doesn't work for the residue, the leftover of the minority majority for not catching a lawsuit on diluting the black vote. It doesn't work for equal distribution of the population because every district has to have 5% up or down, and this map doesn't serve that. It doesn't work on a couple of other things, and it was asked of David Stafford, is this correct? This map does not solve any of those problems. It doesn't work, and he had to, in his very polite way, say yes. I hear you on downtown, which is why I was confused, for instance, that you made the motion for the Roger Scott tennis courts, or why a few commissioners' forums back.
Mel, try to stay on topic, okay?
This is the last one, because this is about downtown. A few commissioner forums back, you started highlighting it by calling out the Fish House, where the big fundraisers happen, that you and I, neither of us are a fan of those.
Off topic.
This is to get it back to downtown, Doug. So would you have a commitment, since you're so concerned about this downtown problem, the rest of your time as commissioner of actually helping our district downtown while you are the commissioner of the district?
Mel, it's really not the right place for a campaign speech.
Oh, this isn't it. No, this isn't a campaign speech. You brought up a lot of things that didn't have to do with redistricting. So I will bring it back then to my questions. If town halls were so important, why didn't you hold any? Why didn't you let the commission know that you weren't going to be there? And why did you bring a map that doesn't fulfill any of the things that needs to be fulfilled for state law and for David Stafford's office?
Yeah. Done? Thanks.
Anybody else?
Speakers?
I just want to, I'll just stand up for a second. I've got a big voice. Anyway, I'm going to go over. Asking your question, everybody, you're individuals, and believe me, I worked at a federal level. I've never been elected, but I've never met a politician that thinks they're out of step with what you want as an individual. They're going to pay attention. So you can send your homeowners association in, fine, but the more people that show up or write, the better off you are, and that's what needs to happen. That's why I'm here, to hear what everybody in this district wants to do, because I've got some concerns about my own district. I want to hear what people are having to say, and I like what I'm hearing. I think I saw you the other night on television, and I know that everybody wants to. They don't want change. That's what you don't want. You don't want Perdido Key to change. You like it the way it is. There was a lady that spoke. We want Perdido Key to stay the way it is. Well, we're going to have development. Nobody in this room lives in a house that was here forever. Nobody. There's been development around here since the Indians were here when they came, the Native Americans, excuse me. But you need to be in touch with your elected officials. My serious concern with any of these maps is I don't feel like people that sit in the seats that you occupy are paying attention to what the problems are in this community. I'm worried about flooding that's going to start because of all the development going on at Dog Track, 125 housing units going in with under our zoning, we're 25 housing units per acre. How did we ever get that passed? Particularly on the west side where there's the drainage is just, you can dig a well with a spoon. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, you make a great point. I mean, you're right. We are out of touch. Okay? We're out of touch with what the citizens want. I'm shocked at the things that we vote on. We're going to spend $22 million to bring high-speed internet to the rural North County. Now, we've got a farm up in North County. Okay? My wife works up there. She has the blessing of being able to work from home, and she has a fairly data-intensive job sitting at her computer at our farm. She uses a MiFi, a little device about this big, that gives her unlimited high-speed internet access through Verizon, and it costs her $40 a month. Okay? The government does not need to spend $22 million on that. But you know what? Everywhere I go, you know what people want? Sidewalk, street lights, stormwater issues, fix the roads, and I would really like it if my fire trucks didn't break down on the way to my house. That's the same thing, and it doesn't matter if you're black or white, if you're rich or poor, west side, east side, North Hill, whatever. That's the priorities of the people, and it always has been. Interestingly enough, if you look at the mandate that creates county commissioners, that's what we were created to do, public safety and infrastructure. Not high-speed internet in the North County, not create jobs, jobs, jobs. Ask any business in Escambia County right now what their biggest problem is. They're going to say number 1 and 2, different companies, it's going to be different 1 or different 2, but these are the 2. Supply chain's all jacked up, and I can't get the supplies I need to do business, or I can't get workers to show up. So if we're spending all of your taxpayer money on jobs, 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 jobs for whom? Well, let me go ahead and break it down for you. Jobs for the people that they need to move to town to buy the houses in the cookie-cutter developments that they're building in all of our farmland that's left over. That's what it's all about. But that's not your equities. It's not what the people want. So I do want to go ahead and address the issues. David Stafford's office is perfectly fine with this. We're within the 5% or so that's required to make sure that you don't get jacked up in a court case. Those comments are just simply not true. I mean, there's no other way to answer it other than the fact that it's just not true. In fact, this map was created on David Stafford's software in David Stafford's office, and with David Stafford's staff right there communicating with him, with Connor the whole time. Those that haven't met Connor, he's not quite a Jonathan level guy, but man, he's getting close. So, go ahead.
Doesn't the Attorney General have the final say-so if this can't be resolved on the redistricting? Because one thing I'm going to do, I'm glad Mel's here. I'd like for the other two candidates running for office, but I think they should be here, even though it's awful strange to me that one of your candidates who just jumped in recently bought a house in Bernardo Key in September, so that's just, and I was told he's going to have a lot of Tallahassee money in this campaign.
Well, personally,
And it is just very-
I tell you what, you're going down the political road, and I'm actually glad that the candidates aren't here, because this town hall is
Yeah.
about these folks. It's not
I'm
about
just saying I'm going to
If they want to
invite
have a
them.
town hall, they can go have a town hall.
No, I'm going to invite them to your other two, because I think I would be concerned about if they're going to have a district to run in. Wouldn't you agree? If I was them, I'd be concerned about if you're going to be in the district by the time you run, it gets there.
My concerns do not have anything to do with elected officials, past, present, or future.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I know it's working.
And when you're done, if you could pass it back, you got somebody behind you as well.
Okay.
So.
I'm Terry McCormick. I'm District 2, right up the road. With Myrtle Grove, with either of these maps, will there be any changes at all to Myrtle Grove?
No,
From what it is right
as the
now.
maps stand right now, the biggest change that you're going to see with the commission proposed one is really the loss of, in my opinion, the loss of Myrtle Grove's WASTA as a county commissioner.
And the Sector 99, is that correct?
Yeah, the Precinct 99, the Precinct 99, it's really, because of the density of 99,
That's what I was
it
wondering. if
becomes,
it's
it really is a hard nut to crack. But I can assure you that if all 5 commissioners were working together, focusing on keeping neighborhoods together as our primary goal, if that was our primary goal, I can just about assure you that we could come up with a way that doesn't upset District 2 so radically and the whole historic West Side so radically, and does keep 99 put 99 back into 2 where it belongs.
No, I do not. I live right up the street, and I'm new here. I've been here year and a couple months, and I chose Myrtle Grove. The house kind of chose me, basically. I mean, that's where I ended up. But the concerns I have are, like everyone's saying, the flooding. Luckily, where I'm at is at the knoll, the top, so I don't get it. But I can't drive the roads. My cars are a disaster right now with flat tires and issues. Flaxman right here, they fill the potholes. The road still sinks because the manhole covers are now up above the potholes. So we've got speed and this, yeah, I'm glad this over here got knocked down because that flooding on 57, same issues.
Well,
I
and
just-
it really does speak to the equities issue of what's important to you.
Yeah, that's where the money needs to
You
go.
know, if we put our money where the people's interest was, we would not be spending $5 million a year on road resurfacing. We'd spend at least $17 million. Why $17 million? A residential road has a lifespan of about 20 years, okay? Which means, logically, you need to resurface 1/20th of your roads every year to maintain them. To replace and to resurface 1/20th of our roads every year would cost $17 million. We put $5 million into roads. Now, what does that mean? That's $12 million worth of roads last year that should have gotten resurfaced that did not, and $12 million the year before that, and the year before that. It's called deferred maintenance. Now, we've been doing that for about a decade now. $5 million or less going to roads. Now, when we had the 2014 flood, we had this stormwater advisory team. I got it wrong the other day. I called it Action Team. Perhaps I was being too optimistic. Where we got, but citizens got together after the 2014 flood, which was this kind of radical come to Jesus moment, right? That said, we need to address this. And they came up with a set of plans. Chris, what would it cost to fund the SWAT recommendations?
It was $417 million in 2015. It's probably with inflation. Well, wait, we only spend $4 million a year on drainage, so that's going to take you 117 years based off that cost at that time. So if you add inflation to it, it's going to take you probably 100.
Well, just be honest, it's just not going to get done. And Terry, that's, again, going back to, you nailed it, right? Everywhere you go in Escambia County, that's the priorities people have. The average common people, right? Not people with that have a lot of appointments and stuff like that, but the average people. Stormwater, street lights, sidewalks, roads that work, fire trucks and ambulances that work, and for God's sake, stop paying minimum wage to cops, right? That's what I hear everywhere that I go. So those are the equities that are the people's equities. Again, if we start with the people's equities, we end up with very different solutions. Oh, I'm sorry.
The last thing I wanted to say is I
I'll come to
agree
you.
with what he said, that this should be put to a vote from the people. Should be on a ballot that we vote on it,
Yeah.
not just the commission.
In modern times, where we actually have the ability to put all this stuff online and people can watch, and you can look at it on your phone, there's no reason for us not to put this stuff in front of the people. There's no reason for us not to have an active process. Go ahead.
So I'm a lifetime resident of this area, lived in the same precinct for the last 25 years. Really interested if town halls are where we should have started. We're way down. You've produced 2 maps. My home's changed between 2 districts on your suggestions. Kind of feel like a pawn in it in some scheme here. Why didn't we start with us? Or why didn't you? You're my representative, and just wondering why now?
Well, it's a great question. And in case, I know as a former county employee, you've been tracking how business is done down at the county. The very first conversation that we had, Jeff floated this idea about Perdido, and everybody kind of laughed about it. And we discussed it and said, actually, the numbers aren't really all that far off. It looks like it's going to be pretty easy. So, hey, Mr. Chairman, what's our process going to be? Okay. There was a little bit of pushback. Jeff didn't want to do this year. He wanted to do it another year. It's like, no, we can do this. And then once the decision got made to do this, well, what about, so this goes, you understand how the county works as a former county employee. County administrator, I can't talk to the other commissions, members, so it's like, hey, what's the process going to be on this? At no time was it ever the will of the board to do it. Now, I'm already down 4-1, you know that. We all know how the politics of the county works, okay? So why didn't I push for having town halls sooner? Okay? In the effort to try to be congenial, and you saw me try to be congenial even today. It's just not, it's not something that's reciprocated on our board right now, okay? But again, how do we get to that, back to that? How do we get to that point? The citizens have to speak up. Commissioner Burgash said fairly recently that the people aren't even really engaged. People don't really care. Got more emails on this subject than any other subject this year. That's a fact. That's a verifiable fact. Every one of the commissioners has gotten more emails on this subject than any other subject this year, including stormwater, in spite of your best efforts to the contrary. So, the citizens are engaged. The citizens do care. But the citizens, I think, were a lot like I was, thinking this kind of crazy talk wasn't going to get any traction. No, unfortunately, it got some traction. So, yes, ma'am.
I live in Perdido, and I just wanted to know how much, what will happen to the population of Perdido? What's going to happen with fire protection? What's going to happen with police protection? How big are we talking about becoming when we add, since I'm not from here, I can't tell you what all those neighborhoods are and what all those precincts are. I have no idea. But when you add all that on top of Perdido, what happens to the key?
Well, I'll tell you that, Perdido Key was literally sucking the life out of this county in a lot of ways, right? There was an effort to put in a 4-lane down Perdido Key Drive, get a bingo parlor on Perdido Key. That 4-lane was a $100 million project. $100 million. Now, we don't have another $100 million project in terms of roads in our county, but because all of the emphasis was on build, 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 or build, baby, build, like they were saying, right? What we were doing was we were sucking the life out of the road projects in the county that really needed attention because they were trying to push this rock up a hill. Now, quite frankly, the election of 2014 was really very heavily focused on stewardship versus development. I was called the no-growther at that time. Interesting enough, now they accuse me of being in bed with the developers. But, and we implemented smart growth on Perdido Key in the form of the Perdido Key Master Plan. Perdido Key Master Plan, and then ultimately, so you got your Habitat Conservation Plan, you got your Perdido Key Master Plan, and then ultimately doing away with that 4-lane debacle by taking it over as a county road. That pretty much puts it to bed forever. The county will never have $100 million without state help to be able to do that. So that's really going to protect Perdido Key from development. As long as the representative of Perdido Key is a steward, not a sellout, okay? So the Perdido Key Master Plan remains that best effort, and for everybody who's not in Perdido Key, every single time that you see a condo go up, every single time that you see build-out happen on that island, it becomes less your island and more somebody else's, okay? So the build-out of that island is not in the best interest of anybody, here on the west side. So the Perdido Key Master Plan, and quite frankly, that beach mouse is your best friend. The beach mouse is the one thing, more than anything, and it was actually Annie, when she was the head of the PKA, that Annie Griffin was the beach mouse lady that pushed that over the edge. You can say everything you want about the beach mouse. The beach mouse, more than anything else in the world, is preventing Perdido Key from becoming Destin. And if you don't live in Perdido Key, and maybe that's not necessarily your equity, look at all the traffic going into Destin and recognize that's your home. Okay, if we ever lift that building cap, the big thing about that 4-lane is the 4-lane, having only 2 lanes, is the justification for the judicially implemented building cap. The building cap, as soon as we hit that building cap, that means no more construction on the island, but you can be certain that the development interests are going to be, they already are, trying to eliminate that, okay? And again, as soon as the build, baby, build attitude returns to that island, it's going to be sucking resources out of the rest of the county that ought to be going into your basic infrastructure in the traditional west side. So, Charles, did you have something?
Yeah, I just thought I'd reiterate. I'm Charles Krupnick, and I'm president of the Perdido Key Association. And I just wanted to, we're the main, I guess, victim of the likely approved redistricting. So I just wanted to reiterate some of the things that myself and some of our other board members on the Perdido Key Association have said at recent meetings. And essentially, as the Commissioner has alluded to, we really don't want to be in competition with Beulah and OLF 8 and the whole really rapid growth.
Charles, can you bring the camera, or can you keep the microphone up to your?
Yeah.
Thanks.
We really don't want to be in competition with Beulah and OLF 8 development, which is probably just gearing up. So for the next several years, that's going to be a main issue in District 1. Looking back at the last several years in Perdido Key, yes, the 4-laning was prevented. We have a master plan. Some of the interest in the northern part of the county don't really like master plan. They just got rid of the sector plan, or they're getting rid of the sector plan that was all set for the area north of I-10. We have a Perdido Key multi-use path, which is going to be something really useful for, I think, a lot of people, increase the safety on along Perdido Key Drive and River Road. We have a bunch of crosswalks now with crossing with up-to-date traffic signals, so that at night they're bright, so you can more or less, you still have to be careful because some people don't watch those things, can cross the road at night. So it's a surprise to us that we're being sent into District 1. Many of our residents, yes, are they live some elsewhere, or many of our owners may live elsewhere, but they have second homes there. But a number of us do live on Perdido Key. We look to a future of modest development, one where the master plan continues in place, where development is limited to a degree. We want some improvements. We'd sure like to have underground utilities. I mean, you drive from Orange Beach into Perdido Key, and to some extent it's a little bit of a shock because Orange Beach has those really nice lamps with underground utilities. We don't. It's something we'll be lobbying for, wherever we are. We'd like a little more parking out there, but we think our interests for the future will certainly be best served by staying in District 2. So, thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Any other comments? Get you next.
Myrtle Grove. So I watched meetings for years now, and I found this redistricting meetings fascinating. And actually riveting, while the group of commissioners who try to form consensus amongst themselves who showed up at that meeting were trying valiantly to reintegrate Myrtle Grove into District 2, and they brought 61, Precinct 75, and Precinct 99 wholly as Myrtle Grove into District 2. Cutting y'all out again, slicing all that up again. Most of my life I've wondered why redistricting ends up happening along the lines that it does. And watching the school board work with the commissioners who showed to try to integrate the school lines so that each representative in a district had a couple of schools instead of this oddity where schools end up getting cut out, and there's school board members who are, yeah, three schools from Kevin Adams, and honestly, when you want to pick up the phone and call your school board member, do you want to have a school board member who is answering to multiple districts? Or do you want to have a school board member who can go ahead and have the time to deal with your concerns? And then, so we end up with some school board members, their phone never rings. All right, that may or may not be good for you. But, Connor, all right, maybe you'll be Jonathan one day on that jet ski, vroom, vroom, I'm coming for you after a fire, right?
Try to stay on the subject.
Oh. And, all right, so now, so far as the PK versus Beulah and all that, Myrtle Grove, listen to all the concerns of PK and think about how bad your roads have gotten in 7 years. Do you want a commissioner who has worked well with FDOT, brought up roads significantly? It's on Non-Mill Road the other day. It's a dream now. I think that in my 28 years here, that area has been under construction. It's pretty much done. And it was quick. It was nice. It wasn't brake stop all the time like PK Drive has become now. I would say, Myrtle Grove people, you probably want to cut and run from Perdido Key. let Jeff Bergosh or District 1 have that from here on out. Yes, absolutely. And keep the money here. Like, you need some unified, small, central, to go ahead and bring this war of the Beulah versus PK versus the rest of D2, Warrington, all that. There are so many projects that should have gone through in 7 years. And I think once you're gone, we'll have a nice small district. Yeah.
Let's try to stay on topic. This really
Stay
isn't
on
about
topic?
politics.
Okay.
Are you done?
$25 million, baby.
Thank you. Always be careful about those who seek to divide. Always, always be careful of those who seek to divide. So,
Tell us how many counties, districts, I guess we're calling, how many districts are going to be in 2 with change, and how many are going to be in 1 with change?
okay, so how many precincts? And yeah, I don't have the, Connor, did you run the numbers on that? So one of the interesting, and so a district is made up of various precincts. Precincts are where you go to vote. One of the interesting things we heard just now a couple of times referring once again to incumbents, this time incumbents with regard to the school board. And Connor's going to run those numbers for get you an answer to that. School board representatives do not represent schools. They represent parents and children. So removing schools, think about the dialogue you just heard, where you're going to take those schools out from under a school board member Frats. It's the wrong dialogue. Again, we're focused on the incumbent. We're not focused on the people that are represented. Schools don't belong to districts. And representatives on the school board do not represent a school. Helen Caro is not a District 2 school or a District 1 school. They represent the people, the parents, and the children who go to those schools. Again, when you listen to the things that are being said, you might just find that people seek to divide instead of unite. You got an answer for her?
Yes. So, hello, for those that don't know me, my name is Connor Mann. If you've called the office within the past year, you may have spoken to myself. But there's 14 currently precincts in District 1, and there's 14 precincts in District 2. The way these maps are drawn, when we look at redistricting, is really by census blocks. And so that's your main focus. We have the precincts on here just so it's bigger sections of those census blocks. It's easier to kind of divide up and really see where the map's going to go. But one of the main objectives in redistricting is trying to smooth out these district lines, right? So we look at these districts and they're all, cockeyed and cattywampus, as one might say. Obviously, this being the majority-minority district, for instance, 101 has a lot of white people in that precinct. So when drawing this map, 101 couldn't be put into District 3 because it threw off the numbers. There had to be a minority-majority district in the way that the county is currently running their redistricting process. What I will say with this proposed map, when we sat down with David Stanford's office, all of the percentage of population in each district has to be a 5% difference, or it can't be more than a 5% difference. This one is in a 4.6 difference. I believe the median number is about 64,000, roundabout there, in population total. But when we sat down with his office, our main objective was to, try to put these communities back together, and trying to do so where there's cleaner lines. Because you get to the point of gerrymandering. In our school systems, we're taught that gerrymandering is this wicked, evil system, which it is. When we redistrict, we don't want to gerrymander. We don't want to know where our elected officials' houses are. Like in the program, in our we got a soft program, so not the full program, a kind of buzzed down version of it. But we got a program to work with in our office. And when you start the program, the first thing you see is where the commissioners' houses are. There's little stars on the maps that can tell you, oh, they're actually on these maps. I think if you look at your handouts, you might be able to see them. But these stars are where school board members and county commissioners currently live.
Again, when you start from saying, I need to make sure that I have a particular district marked out by skin color, and then you follow up with that with, we need to make sure that we protect the equities of the temporary residents in each of these seats, you're already on the wrong path, and the path that you're not on is the path that represents the people. So, guys, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I think it was a very good discussion. I would ask that everybody who has any opinion about this, one way or the other, doesn't really matter. I mean, you'll find actually, Connor was he started off, he came to me as an intern, and we ended up keeping him for, I don't know how long you've been with us now. But I very much value and surround myself with people who don't tell me what I want to hear, but tell me the truth. And anybody who's met Jonathan, you recognize that that's exactly why. Not only is he my aide, but he's my best friend. So please hit me up at the county, talk to the other county commissioners, talk to your friends, and talk to them about how these changes will affect you. Okay? It's important that we have the dialogue. It's important that we have that discussion among the people, and that those voices be heard by those of us who are temporary stewards of the seats that represent you.
I would just make one suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
You go to at least 6 or 7 black churches, and you tell them exactly what you just told us.
That's a pretty good idea.
Because there's nobody here. They're not here, and they're not going to be.
Yeah.
You got to go where they are.
All right. Thanks. Chris, did you want to finish this up?
Yeah,
You're going to make a plug for Flood Defenders, aren't you? I'm going to go ahead and do it for you. Y'all need to check out Flood Defenders. It's worth looking at. That's right.
Actually, you mentioned something about
Make it short. She's been waiting.
the American Recovery Act, the $22 million. The county had $62 million. They actually put a survey out for the people to say, where do you want to spend this money? And then they came back and put 1.8% in drainage. I was pretty pissed about that, but just to let you know, Biden's infrastructure plan, broadband is in there, so they should probably do the design part first and then go after that federal funding for that internet service.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Barbara. I've lived in this area for approximately 52 years now. The color issue in our county is changing dramatically. Used to be, Brownsville and certain areas downtown. Well, I'm proud to say, stand up and look around your community, folks. There are black people right next door. There are black people living in homes with white people, just like me. My nephews live with me, and they're men of color, and I'm proud of them. We need to stop thinking along the lines of what's good for this area because it's a black area, and what's good for this area because it's a white area. That doesn't fit anymore. Open your eyes and look around you, and thank God things are changing in regards to race in our county, because it was a long time coming.
Yeah, you nailed that point. I mean, it was when I was growing up, seeing an interracial marriage was an odd thing. The idea that we'd have a black president, odd thing. By the time I got commissioned, my first commanding officer was a black man. And I mean, as a military guy, the military kind of led the way on a lot of things, and certainly the integration of race is one of them. Because when somebody's dragging you out of a really bad place, you do not care about the color of his skin. So I appreciate the comments. You're right. I mean, it's time for our politics to match what, again, we call ourselves leaders. And it's kind of silly, right? Because we don't really do much leading. The reality is that the people have already led on this path. Interracial relationships are fairly common. The census still says, well, what color is your family, right? Well, I mean, that's not as easy. I mean, that used to be a check one. That needs to be a check all that apply now. Or even better, just eliminate the question, because it's really not what divides us. It only divides us by those who actually profit from that division. And that's really true just about any time that people are trying to divide you. So, again, thanks a lot, everybody, for your time. Pastor, I appreciate you letting us use this building. You're truly a great steward to your community. Whether somebody is a follower of Christ or is a member of your church, I've never seen you treat anybody any differently. You treat everybody like a neighbor.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank everybody for coming, and I appreciate everybody's opinion. I grew up, in a family that said, there's in the South, there's two things people are passionate about, and that is politics and religion. And I think it's three things: SEC football, Roll Tide. So I just had to throw that in there. I'm sorry.
All right, I take back that I just said about you.
Take back that. But thank you for coming, and I do appreciate the partnership that we've had with our county commissioners and our county commissioner, Doug Underhill, who has worked with Myrtle Grove Revitalization Group throughout the years to bring some great improvement to this area. And hopefully, I wish you the best in your endeavors moving forward, and whoever our county commissioner is, I plan on working with them. Just as I prayed for President Trump, I'll also pray for President Biden and his cabinet as well, because we're going to, if we're going to see improvements, if we're going to help improve people's lives, we've got to get to a point to where we can work together instead of standing on our proverbial side of the fence and name calling. We've got to get past that. And I have hope, and maybe it's blind hope, but I do have hope that one day we can get to a place to where we can look out for the needs of everyone and not just the needs of a few. So,
Pastor, there's a word for there's a word for blind hope, and that's called faith.
Yeah, amen. Amen.
Thanks again.
Thank you so
your church,
much,
sir.
and thank you all for coming. I really do. And I just say this, as I do on Sunday morning as well. You don't have to leave. You're welcome to stand outside all you want and talk the rest of the night. But I'm about to lock this building up because my wife is expecting me to come home.
Good call, sir.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Amen.
Yes, he has. Appreciate it. These yours or ours?